Hi, and welcome to this fantastic training session with Learning to Lean. My name is Katie Lebeds, and I'll be your host today, so let's get started. In today's session, we're going to talk about project management, and more specifically, let's look at the key part of a project, which is the project charter. So what's a project charter? Well, first of all, a project charter is a document. Now that can be a Word document, an Excel file, or even in a system. It's issued by the project manager or sponsor. It authorizes work on this project, and it provides the project manager or PM with the authority to use resources to meet the scope, goal, and deliverables. And of course, a project charter helps you sell your project. When somebody's reading your project charter, they should sit up in their seat and think, wow, why haven't we solved this problem before? Your project charter is the project's best marketing tool. So it's created at the very start of the project and it's updated along the way. Your project charter is a living document. It's an ideal place to document the relationships between the project and the organizational strategy. A project charter is what we use throughout the life of a project. It contains information such as the project title, project manager name, sponsor name, project description, scope, deliverables, start and end dates, and project team members. And we're going to look at each of those sections. I like to think of a project charter like an anchor. It's not something that weighs you down, but it helps to keep us from drifting off course. It reminds us where we need to be, even when the big waves of scope change come in and try to move us in another direction. Do you use a project charter for each project you work on? Now, let's take a look at some project charter examples. Here's a great example of a project charter. It has that basic information that we're looking for in there. Of course, we have our project title and project manager and sponsor. We have that project start and end date. We have the business need and our project scope, our deliverables, risks and issues, assumptions and dependencies. There's also an area in there in which you can list milestones. Now keep in mind that those milestones should also be reflected in your project plan. There's a section for our project team and then approval and review committee. Also keep in mind that this could be done electronically within a system. Some people use SharePoint for their project charters, in which we could have electronic signatures for approvals. Here's a sample project charter from PMI, or the Project Management Institute. You can find this example at pmi.org. This is set up in a little bit different fashion. This is in a Word document, and it has project name, prepared by, description of the project, etc. The one thing that I would suggest that I don't see on here is the project start date and the project end date. It's so important to know that, especially if you have to go back and look at historical project information. Now, some people use an A3 type format for a project charter, and an A3 format is really based off the size of the paper in Europe, A3 size. And as you can see, that has a little bit of a different layout, but it has similar items in it as you've seen in the previous two examples. A3 has a very specific format that it follows. So first of all, we want to clarify the problem. Second, we break down the problem. Then we set a target, we analyze the root cause, we develop countermeasures and implement those, we monitor results, and then we standardize and share success. This is a very specific format and a very specific mentality for following a A3 type of project charter, typically followed by a Lean Six Sigma approach. Just like in Orange, project charters have different sections, which I've already talked about. But let's go ahead and look at those individual sections in greater detail. First up is our project title and description. In this area, we're asking, what is the project? What's this project all about anyways? What problem are we trying to solve? Which honestly is my favorite question. What new product or processes are we creating? And are there any measurables that we have available? Remember, this section of our project charter is where we really want people, again, to sit up in their seat and wonder, how have we not solved this problem in the past? That's how well it should be written and easily understood by all. Next, let's talk about the project manager that's been assigned in their authority level. So first of all, the first question we ask is, who is the project or program manager assigned to this project? And even more importantly, are they empowered to make decisions on managing, approving changes to the budget, schedule, and resources? If they're not, who is? Again, your project manager should be somebody with experience, and even if they're not, at least have somebody that can mentor and guide them through this. This shouldn't be viewed as just another job or another task for a manager to do. We want somebody that has experience, knowledge, and capabilities to do this and drive that project to success. Now let's discuss the business case portion of the project charter. In this section, we are answering the questions, why is this project being done? In other words, why should we pay you to work on this project? We also want to know, how does this project align with the strategic goals of the business? Now, projects shouldn't be done to achieve just personal goals, right? Especially in a larger corporation. We want to make sure that your project aligns with the strategic goals of the business. And we have to talk about money. So do we have the money in order to complete this project? Again, not every project costs millions of dollars, but some of them do. And describe the purpose and the justification for this project. Many people's favorite, or maybe not so favorite, topic is to talk about resources. So when we're talking about resources, especially in the world that we're in right now, where resources, we have a huge constraint there. We have to understand right from the beginning of our project what resources are required. So inside your company and outside, maybe you're bringing in a consultant like me to help, or you may be relying on people within your organization. What's their availability? So just because these people exist doesn't mean they necessarily have time in the current workload, as everybody's juggling everything to help. It's helpful to provide a rough cut estimate of time required from these resources. So if you're going to a manager and you're saying, hey, we need to borrow Lisa to help on this project, it really helps to be able to also provide an estimate of how much time we really need from her, and a rough cut budget of any of the outside resources that may be required. Let's talk about stakeholders next. The way I describe stakeholders would be anyone that is positively or negatively impacted by your project. So when you're looking at your project, you need to understand who are the process owners or owner, and then who receives the product of this particular process, upstream and downstream. So where do you get the information from, and where do you pass the outcome to? So that's what we're really talking about for stakeholders. Again, who will be impacted or influenced by this project would be a stakeholder. Now let's talk about deliverables. Everybody wants to know what's going to be the outcome of this project. So we need to be very specific about what our project deliverables will be and are wanted by our project sponsors. And what will be the end result of this project? So what are we intending to deliver? And again, that delivery could be a physical entity of a product, or it could also be a service. Next up are assumptions. Now, we all know about assumptions and what they stand for. So the things that you have to keep in mind when you're doing your project, that those assumptions are out there, and we have to understand what is believed to be true or reliable in this situation. And of course, what do we believe to be the case, but we don't have proof or data for yet. Now we'll talk about constraints. Boy, that's not something we want to admit, that we have a constraint, but it's definitely something you need to bring out early and often within your project. So for constraints, we're talking about what factors may limit our ability to deliver and what boundaries or parameters will the project have to function within. Measurable project objectives is probably one of my favorite parts because we're talking about data in this section. We want to ask, how does the project tie into the organization's strategic goals? So your organization probably has strategic goals set at the beginning of the year, of your fiscal year or calendar year. So we want to understand how this project ties in. What are the project objectives to support these goals? And of course, your objectives need to be measurable. And if you don't know what measurable means, it means that it involves numbers in which we can do math with. So measurable would be, it currently takes 12 weeks and our goal is to reduce that to 5 weeks, not our current process takes a very long time and we want to shorten it. So again, measurable objectives have to deal with data, numerical values that you can do math with. Project approval requirements. It's very important to make sure that we understand that and have that out in the open right from the beginning of the project. We have to understand what items need to be approved for the project, who will have the sign off, and what designates success. So typically what I see in projects is that the project manager has a certain level of authority, usually up to a certain dollar amount. So just for example, maybe they have approval authority up to $10,000. And if it goes beyond that dollar amount, then they will go to their supervisor or to their project sponsor. Now we'll talk about project risks, high-level project risks. And we'll have a whole other video talking about project risks and using a risk register. But initially, what are any potential threats or opportunities for this project? So project risks deal with Murphy's Law. If it can go wrong, it will. So let's try to get that out in the open. Let's document it and let's have a plan to counteract it. Besides the project description, the project scope is so important in your project. When you are creating a problem statement, the project scope defines the boundaries. So you can say it's the fence post or like goal posts. The team understands the business need and expected outcome for the project. We recognize constraints. We're aware of assumptions. We gain alignment. We understand processes and how they're affecting, and we recognize entities that the project solution will interface with. Your project scope statement is so important. As I mentioned, it's one of the most important parts of your project charter, and it's so important to make sure that everyone on the project team understands the scope so that there are no questions about this later. Your project scope statement will help save you when things start to go off the rails. A project scope statement defines the work to be done and those parameters. Like I said, fence posts, goal posts, lines in the sand, think of that. The scope statement defines what's in and what's out of the project. The project scope statement defines what's being delivered or in scope, what's not being delivered, which we would consider out of scope. It talks about assumptions to clarify the deliverables and any clarification needed. Now let's look at two examples of a completed project charter. This one I was able to find at projectmanagementskills.info, and as you can see, it is a completed project charter where it's listing the business case, the measurable targets or goals, our team members, talks about what is in scope and out of scope, key deliverables, some milestone dates, and even some assumptions or constraints and risks. Here's another one from TechnoPM. This is another example of a completed project charter. Again, it has that project start date and end date, which I really appreciate and I think is very important. And it has our business need. And this one just lists out the project scope in a sentence. Again, I prefer having a very specific format of project in scope and project out of scope. Lists the risks and issues and the budget and some milestone activities. Thanks for joining me today in this quick session on project charters. My name is Katie Lebetz, and I am the president of a continuous improvement consulting firm called Learning to Lean. We help to improve your processes, get you organized, and establish systems. We also provide training, so continuous improvement, Lean and Six Sigma, project management training. I'm also an author of a book called How to Improve Absolutely Anything, Continuous Improvement for Your Work and Home Life. You can find that on Amazon. Please feel free to reach out to us at our website, learningtolean.training, or email info@learningtolean.training, or of course, we're on all social media channels. Thank you and have a fantastic day.